Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Take a deep breath and allow yourself to settle into stillness. The sun is warm, but the road is dusty. You shift the staff in your hand, taking a deep breath. To get to Santiago de Compostela and see the tomb of St. James, you have left home and crossed fields and hills and rivers. You have plodded through mud and climbed mountains. You have slept beside the road or in the crowded dormitories of roadside inns. If you are lucky, someone has welcomed you into their home for the night. Along the way, you have met beggars and merchants, monks and nobles. Some walked the same road towards Santiago, while others traveled in the opposite direction, bringing news from distant lands. All around you are signs of life and death, beauty and decay, kindness and cruelty, feasting and famine. Today, you carry nothing but the clothes on your back and the staff in your hand, relying on the charity of strangers for food and shelter. Sometimes people give what they can spare. Sometimes there isn't enough to go around. A young girl asks for a crust of bread, and you break the last piece of bread in your pack with her. When you resume your journey, her eyes follow you, and for a moment, you think she might run after you. She doesn't. You keep walking. For some, the road to Santiago is a lifetime's work, taken up in stages over many years. For others, it is a brief interruption to the life they once lived. Soon the road forks. One path leads towards the sea, the other deeper into the interior of France. Both are dangerous, both are arduous, but each carries with it the possibility of miracles. Whichever path you choose, there are two things you know for sure. First, you will walk barefoot. Second, you will walk alone. As night falls, you look for somewhere to rest. You find a quiet spot off the road, far from the sounds of human activity. Here, the only company you have is the wind rustling through the trees. You lie down and close your eyes, letting the darkness carry you away. In the morning, you awake to birdsong. You rise, shake off the stiffness of sleep, and begin to walk. The sun is warm on your shoulders, and the road stretches out before you, an open invitation to keep going. How long you have been walking, you do not know. Neither do you know where you will find rest at the end of the day, but still you go forward. The road is all you have, it is also all you need. In 1499, a middle-class housewife named Marjorie Kemp left England to travel the continent. Her destination was Jerusalem. On the way, she walked across France to Santiago de Compostela and back again. Though it is often forgotten today, walking was the main way people got around in the Middle Ages. Roads were rarely paved, so pilgrims like Marjorie trekked along muddy tracks, sometimes wading through water and occasionally clambering over rocks and fallen trees. Travelers typically walked barefoot, though wealthier folk might wear leather shoes or soft boots. During the day, Marjorie would have rested several times, taking a break from the monotony of putting one foot in front of the other. She could stop by a roadside shrine, kneel down, and pray for a moment before getting back on the road. Travelers also stopped frequently to eat, though they were expected to bring their own rations. Unlike our protagonist from part 1, Marjorie was not a penniless beggar, but she wasn't wealthy either. She would have carried a staff, a pouch, a loaf of bread, some cheese, dried meat and fruit. A rope or leather thong was used to carry these items, looped through a belt around her waist or tied to the end of her staff. At night, Marjorie would look for somewhere safe to sleep. Sometimes she stayed in an inn, paying a fee for a bed in a crowded dormitory shared by men and women. Other times, she slept out of doors, huddling beneath the stars with fellow travelers and beggars. Just as she walked during the day, Marjorie Kemp slept while walking. In other words, she slept while walking. Along the way, she would have seen sleeping beggars who had given up on the journey and died at the roadside. Despite the stench of decay, Marjorie probably continued on, hoping to live long enough to reach her goal. In her case, the desire to see the Holy Land and walk in the footsteps of Jesus Christ drove her forward. Yet even she took pauses along the way to tend to her aching feet and soothe her tired body. Like Marjorie, many pilgrims traveled because they needed to make a journey in order to be cured of an illness or disability. Some wanted to see important sights for themselves, and others sought to visit relatives. Of course, many went on pilgrimage to venerate relics like the staff of Moses or the Virgin Mary's girdle. But why would anyone want to walk for years without shoes and expose themselves to the elements? Well, seeing as the alternative was working for days on end for a few scraps of food, exposure to the elements was actually quite bearable. And the hardships of the journey were offset by the possibility of divine favor. Every blister, every limp, every sore reminded the pilgrim why they were doing this. Their suffering would not be in vain. After walking for weeks, Marjorie Kempe reached the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. It didn't matter that she had walked barefoot over rough terrain, exposed to rain, sleet, snow, and sunshine. Here, everything was forgotten except for the fact that she had made it. Inside the cathedral, the saint's tomb lay behind an ornate silver screen. According to legend, when Saint James the Greater learned that his brother John had been martyred in Spain, he walked over from his home in Israel to console their mother. He never left and was himself put to death in Jerusalem, or so the story went. Whether it was true or not, it was comforting to know that a saint had walked a long way to help out his mom. For Marjorie and other pilgrims, James had walked a long way to help them out too. The bones in the tomb were not his, of course, but they were the bones of a saint nonetheless. As Marjorie stepped up to the altar and touched the silver screen, she believed that some of the saint's holiness would rub off on her. After kissing the stone, she would have felt closer to God. Now, instead of walking toward Jerusalem, she walked back to her starting point. Eventually, she returned to England and became one of the first English people to write an autobiography. In her book, she wrote about the pain of walking without shoes, having to ask for food, and the crowds of pilgrims along the road. Marjorie's account of walking to Santiago de Compostela and back again helps us understand what the experience was like during the late Middle Ages. Though she was a high-ranking member of a religious order, she still had to suffer along the way. But she knew that her troubles would end soon after she reached her destination. We have already discussed relics like the staff of Moses and the girdle of the Virgin Mary. But what exactly was a holy relic? Remember, in medieval Europe, people could not read the Bible in their native language, and literacy rates were low. Most Christians couldn't even read. For most people, the Bible was not a book, but a living presence in the world around them. This is why they were willing to believe that a piece of wood was really the staff of Moses. Miracle stories associated with relics convinced people of their authenticity. In 1204, a bishop reported that a woman in southern France began glowing with a heavenly light whenever she touched the arm of Saint Felix of Valois. Years later, that arm was placed inside a reliquary, which is a container used to hold a relic. That relic arm attracted thousands of pilgrims who hoped to be healed by touching it. Since relics were supposed to have miraculous powers, churches built around them grew into popular pilgrimage sites. Of course, people visited more than one site on their journey, so they passed dozens of relics on their way to Santiago de Compostela. Not everyone considered these objects holy. In fact, the church spent much of the Middle Ages tracking down relics that had been stolen from monasteries and other sacred places. Medieval European kings and queens liked to show off their power and wealth, but how did they do it? Well, by building enormous palaces, obviously, but also by going on pilgrimage. You see, when a monarch went to Santiago de Compostela, they demonstrated their control over the land they traveled through. More importantly, they showed that they had the money to sustain themselves and their entourage on a months-long journey. While Marjorie Kempe walked barefoot, King Charles VI of France brought an army along with him. He wasn't afraid of bandits, though, but of other kings. King Henry V of England wanted to take the city of Bordeaux from Charles VI. So while Charles was traveling to Santiago, Henry invaded northern France. Charles marched right back to defend his territory. What kind of king would he be if he didn't protect his people? Sure, he might have had to trample over peasants and commoners to get to Santiago, but that was a small price to pay for the glory of showing England who was boss. Charles didn't make it all the way to Santiago, but he probably didn't care. After all, what did he accomplish by marching north? He chased Henry V back south and got to spend a lot of time in the saddle. Here's something else. Peasants could become princes. Let me repeat that. Peasants could become princes. How did this happen? Well, it depended on who you were, how long you walked, and whether you made it to Santiago de Compostela. Let's say you are a peasant who has walked the road to Santiago and back again. You are dirty, tired, hungry, and ready for a good night's sleep. Suddenly, the king approaches you and tells you he has been watching you walk the road. Impressed by your dedication, he invites you to come with him back to the palace. In exchange for walking in front of his court, he will give you money, food, and status. For a few weeks or months, you are a prince. Then you return to being a peasant. Does that sound unbelievable? Well, during the 13th century, a French poet named Walter of Châtillon published a poem called The Pilgrimage to the Court of Love. It is about a king who travels to a fictionalized Santiago de Compostela to receive a mysterious letter. On his way, he meets a poor widow who is so beautiful that he decides to marry her. He was drawn to her because she walked the road without complaint. As a reward, he gives her everything she wants, including permission to build a hospital for pilgrims near Santiago. In this story, the widow represents every pilgrim on the road. They are not necessarily poor, says Walter, but they don't complain when they are. Pilgrims who accept gifts from passers-by must be generous, says Walter, but not greedy. Those who beg for money should not expect it to last long. By walking the road, pilgrims proved their commitment to the journey, and that made them attractive to kings. It's as if the road itself gave them superpowers. It's time for another history hot tip. Do you want to walk the road to Santiago de Compostela for real? Well, you can. In fact, every year, thousands of tourists and pilgrims make the journey on foot. There are multiple routes to choose from, and most are well marked and easy to follow. If you want to walk the same roads as Marjorie Kempe and countless other pilgrims throughout history, start planning your trip today. Thanks for joining us on this episode of History in a Minute. In the year 1413, Marjorie Kempe awoke in her chamber in King's Lynn and began to dream. In this vision, Christ spoke to her, directing her toward the Holy Land and commanding her to go there on pilgrimage. Now, though she had no desire to leave her cozy home and family behind, God persisted in his command, and over the course of the next few months, he sent a series of dreams, visions, and angelic messengers to reiterate his desire. Eventually, Marjorie agreed. She would go to Jerusalem. When she told her husband, Simon Kemp, of her plan to embark on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, his response was, "Go and see." He wanted proof of God's will. So Jesus appeared to Simon in a dream, telling him to send his wife and make sure she has provisions and money for her journey. Only then did Simon agree to let Marjorie go. Now, Marjorie Kemp's pilgrimage was unusual. She was married, unlike most medieval pilgrims who traveled alone, and she was wealthy enough to afford a private guide and 4 servants. Though she was a devout Christian, she was not of the highest moral character. She was bossy and impatient, given to fits of anger. While pious, she was easily tempted by luxuries and comforts. And so she was a very human pilgrim, driven by the divine, but guided by human hands. The first leg of her journey took her through England to the port city of Hull, where she boarded a ship bound for Jerusalem. The crossing was rough, lasting 27 days, and there she experienced storms, illness, and a fire. When Marjorie finally set foot on solid ground again, she was in Flanders, and her first stop was the nearby city of Bruges. She stayed there 2 weeks, visiting shrines, making offerings, and staying in an inn. Then she set out for what she thought would be her final stop before reaching Jerusalem. From Bruges, she wrote letters back to her husband detailing her experiences thus far, marveling at how much the people of Europe differed from those of England. She complained that the Flemish were lazy and dirty, the French proud and arrogant, and the Germans greedy and argumentative. For nearly 2 years, Marjorie travelled, visiting shrines, attending mass, staying in inns, making offerings, and above all, walking. She stopped in places that were popular destinations for medieval pilgrims, such as St. Denis, famous for its shrine containing the relics of Jesus' Passion. Marjorie visited churches housing relics of the true cross and other objects connected to the Passion, as well as sites associated with the Virgin Mary, such as the Chapel of Our Lady at Troyes, where, according to legend, Mary had stopped to rest on her way to visit her son, who was imprisoned in a fortress at Poitiers. Her travels brought her into contact with people from every walk of life, merchants and nobles, priests and hermits. But she didn't just observe these people, she talked to them, asked questions, engaged with them. She learned about falconry from a Portuguese knight and listened to a Spanish priest expound on the virtues of fasting. She heard stories of miraculous healings and witnessed acts of great piety, such as the reverence shown by German pilgrims at the shrine of Our Lady in Aachen. But she also saw poverty, sickness, war, and death. She met beggars who had dedicated their lives to God and watched as fellow pilgrims died of pestilence and were buried in shallow graves. These experiences led to periods of reflection and deepening in her understanding of her faith. For example, when she was in Cologne, Marjorie encountered 2 men who made their living telling stories for money. One was blind. His companion told stories, and the blind man would describe them to the audience, enriching the narrative with his own comments. Through them, Marjorie had a profound realization that God reveals himself in unexpected ways. The storyteller was giving glory to God through his craft, and the blind man was doing the same through his participation. So Marjorie marveled that thus God offereth himself to be seen in divers manners of instruments, as well of men as of other creatures. This recognition of God's presence in everyday life was a central theme in Marjorie's pilgrimage. As she continued on, she discovered that the common people of each region knew best where to find holy relics and hidden shrines. So she learned to rely on their knowledge and guidance, saying, "I found by experience that holy relics be more hid in sundry places of this pilgrimage than any worldly treasure that ever I wist of in my life." Edine. As she walked, she followed a winding route across France, through Metz and Nancy to Verdun, where she spent some time praying at the tomb of St. Walpurgis. Then she headed south through Tours and Le Mans to the bustling city of Paris, where she prayed at the tomb of St. Denis and visited Notre Dame Cathedral. Here she heard confessions, received a new pilgrim's badge and scallop shell, and attended a solemn procession of the Virgin Mary, in which thousands of people participated. Pilgrims came from all over Europe for the procession, which caused Paris to be filled with such a multitude of folk that there was no room for man nor beast. After another stop in Tours, Marjorie arrived in Poitiers, where she paid homage to the Virgin Mary at the site where she had supposedly rested. From here, she passed through Limoges to Bordeaux, where she took a boat across the Garonne River. Now we know that Marjorie wanted to get to Jerusalem, but her plans changed when she heard about a church near Bordeaux that housed part of the true cross. Seeing as she was already there, she decided to visit. It was an important moment in her journey because, as she wrote, "And when I had kissed and held that holy cross in my hand, it seemed to me that all the world was crucified upon it, that is to say, all the worldly substance and I and all the fellowship of worldly folk. And I felt myself so vile and so unworthy." After this, she and her entourage headed south, passing through diverse landscapes including mountains, rivers and fields. They explored Roman ruins, went hunting for mushrooms, and Marjorie even fell down a well. Soon she was deep in Aquitaine, where she encountered more pilgrims. She wrote of their numbers. On the same day, we saw pass us by a great multitude of English pilgrims going towards Wiltshire. Then she herself headed to the city of Wiltshire, where she stood in awe of the beautiful church and prayed at the shrine containing a piece of the true cross. Marjorie's journey was marked by constant movement, both physically and spiritually. From town to town she went, always keeping up her habit of daily confession and receiving the Eucharist. Besides her private devotions, she attended services, processions, and other public acts of worship. Her description of a procession in Beauvais was particularly vivid. She described how everyone participated, from the highest to the lowest, and how the clergy led the way with banners and crosses. She encountered many challenges during her travels. She faced criticism from other pilgrims for traveling with a large group and staying in inns instead of the common hostels. She argued with merchants who tried to charge her exorbitant prices for supplies, and she experienced moments of fear and doubt. Once, when she heard rumors that Jerusalem had fallen to the Turks, causing her to consider turning back. Despite these setbacks, she pressed on, driven by her devotion to God and the belief that He had a special plan for her in the Holy Land. Her journey eventually brought her to Marseille, where she embarked on a sea voyage to reach Jerusalem. We don't know the exact date of Marjorie's arrival in Jerusalem, but her account tells us that it happened during Holy Week in 1414. She had walked over 1,600 miles to get there. Once in Jerusalem, Marjorie visited the major holy sites. She walked the streets of Bethlehem, bathed in the Jordan River, and attended Easter services in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where she received communion for the first time since leaving England. In Jerusalem, she experienced a profound sense of fulfillment. She had reached her goal and witnessed the sacred sites she had yearned to see. But this sense of completion was also tinged with sadness. Her journey was coming to an end, and she knew she would soon have to return to England. Before leaving, she received a vision from Jesus, who gave her a ring, which in worldly estimation were well worth £1,000. According to her vision, the ring was a symbol of her commitment to spreading the message of the Holy Land. As she departed Jerusalem, she left behind a part of herself, saying goodbye to the city with tears. But Marjorie Kemp's journey was not truly over. After returning to England, she continued to share her experiences with anyone who would listen. She became known as the Woman of the Holy Land and was called upon to preach and raise money for the church. Although she faced skepticism and mockery from some, she remained committed to her mission, saying, "Although I have been a layman and a woman, I am not ashamed to speak of these things." The story of Marjorie Kempe is a fascinating account of a medieval pilgrimage. Her journey was not just a physical one, but also a spiritual and emotional journey. Marjorie's story reminds us that pilgrimages are not just about the destination, but about the journey and the experiences that shape our faith and understanding of the world. What did you think? What was your favorite part of the story? Tell me in the comments below. If you like this video, remember to check out our other series and leave a like and subscribe. See you next time. The Book of Marjorie Kempe is unique. Written about 600 years before your favorite novel, it's one of the earliest autobiographies in English. It was written down between 1436 and 1438 by Marjorie herself, dictated slowly to a scribe in the privacy of her home in King's Lynn. What makes this story so remarkable is that it was dictated by a very ordinary woman who had no reason to think that her life story would be read by anyone except her husband. But fortunately for us, she changed our understanding of medieval life forever. So join me today as we follow Marjorie on her incredible journey. Her name was Marjorie Kempe. She lived in England during the late 14th and early 15th centuries in the bustling market town of King's Lynn. Imagine the streets of her youth, Narrow lanes of timbered houses, the sound of hooves on cobblestones, the salty tang of the nearby sea drifting inland. Merchants carried goods through the port, while townspeople haggled over fish, wool, and grain. Marjorie's life was not simple, though. It began with the promise of ordinary comfort. She married, she bore children, she worked to maintain a household, but her inner world was not so ordinary. After the birth of her first child, she experienced visions, startling, vivid encounters with Christ and the saints, which she described with great intensity. These visions shaped her path, transforming her from a merchant's wife into a mystic and, most importantly for us, a pilgrim. In her early 20s, Marjorie gave birth to her first child, a boy. But shortly after his birth, she became ill and soon recovered, only to fall into a deep depression and have terrifying dreams. By Christmas of that same year, she felt called to do penance for unknown sins, walking barefoot to church, kneeling on hard boards, enduring vigils until dawn. Then came the visions. In them, Christ confronted her for her neglect of her duties as a Christian. As punishment, he tore her soul and cast it into hell. Startled awake, Marjorie immediately resolved to lead a better life. She fell to her knees and begged for God's mercy. Heeding Christ's call to repent, she spent 2 years in a disciplined routine of prayer, fasting, and work around the house. But this newfound piety did not bring peace. On January 29, 1413, Marjorie was working at the loom when she heard someone call her name. Turning around, she saw no one. Soon, however, the voice spoke to her again, and this time she recognized it as her patron saint, Margaret of Antioch. St. Margaret told Marjorie to go to church, where Christ would reveal to her the source of her troubling visions. In a vision that day, Christ appeared to Marjorie, revealing that her punishment resulted from her pride in her fine clothes. She should therefore live a life of poverty and humility. Terrified of losing her soul, Marjorie decided to obey. She took off her ring, cut off her hair, and dressed in a coarse woolen gown. She then put on a veil and went out into the street. For Marjorie, this marked the beginning of her life as a penitent. She visited churches, praying and singing psalms. She lavished charity on beggars, giving away all she could spare. Then something miraculous happened. Christ appeared to her again and promised her heavenly rewards for her faithful service. Reassured, Marjorie continued her life of prayer and charity. One day, she felt compelled to visit a hermit living near Lynn. During confession, the hermit suggested that Marjorie take a solemn vow of chastity, poverty, and obedience to God. Impelled by divine inspiration, Marjorie vowed never to marry again, never to own property, and to dedicate herself completely to God. Her former life now gone, she decided to live a life of solitude. She begged for permission from her husband, Simon, to move into a small room next to the chapel in their house. Although initially shocked, Simon eventually relented, granting her request. For the next 3 years, Marjorie devoted herself entirely to religious pursuits, sleeping little and working tirelessly to make wax and tallow candles for the church. However, her rest was troubled by vivid dreams and visions. Christ once more confronted her, expressing displeasure with her lack of faith and charity. Feeling spiritually empty, Marjorie prayed for guidance. Then suddenly, as she looked up, she saw angels descending from heaven to tell her that she must visit the shrine of St. James of Compostela in Spain. Despite the expense and danger of such a journey, Marjorie knew in her heart that she had to go. On April 1414, Marjorie left home for the last time, never to return. Her husband gave her 13 shillings for expenses, and a priest blessed her on her way. Making her way to the port city of Hull, she boarded a ship bound for Flanders. There she fell terribly sick with seasickness and stayed below deck for days, only getting up when the ship finally landed in northern France. Walking unsteadily onto land, she made her way to a nearby church, where she collapsed and lay for a month. Once recovered, she set out for Paris, where she received another gift from God. This time it was a miraculous crust of bread that provided her with sustenance for the whole of her journey. With renewed strength, she continued her travels, visiting many holy sites along the way. Eventually she arrived in Compostela, where she performed her pilgrimage and experienced great joy. Pilgrims are often motivated by the desire to see relics, physical objects associated with Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and other saints. These relics are thought to possess special powers and draw millions of pilgrims to visit them every year. Back in Marjorie's time, this was also true. She wanted to see the bones of St. James. In the early Middle Ages, relics were highly prized possessions for churches, used to distinguish one church from another and attract more worshippers. The most valuable relics were those that could perform miracles, which often led to claims of healing and increased devotion. Marjorie was moved by the reverence of the pilgrims. They called it a blessed place. Overwhelmed by emotion, she prostrated herself in the dust and experienced profound spiritual insights. After 4 days in Compostela, feeling refreshed and inspired, Marjorie set out on her journey back to England. But this time, her path took her south through France, across the Pyrenees Mountains, and into Spain. Crossing the mountains was difficult. Marjorie struggled with exhaustion and illness, and questioned whether she could continue. But driven by her faith, she pressed on, and soon found herself in Santiago de Compostela, where she completed her pilgrimage. From here, she traveled to the Holy Land, spending several months in Jerusalem and walking all the way to the Egyptian border. During her travels, she experienced various hardships, including illness, exhaustion, and financial difficulties. At times, she doubted her ability to continue, but she was inspired by the beauty of the countryside and the kindness of strangers who offered her hospitality and shared their food with her. Through these experiences, she deepened her faith and strengthened her resolve to complete her pilgrimage. Marjorie's journey was a testament to her unwavering determination and her deep commitment to her religious beliefs. After experiencing the wonders of the Holy Land, Marjorie began her long journey back home. She traversed France and Belgium, stopping at various holy sites and enduring further illness and fatigue. Finally, she arrived in Hull, where she had started her journey 3 years earlier. Exhausted but fulfilled, she had walked over 3,000 miles and crossed the North Sea twice. She returned home a changed person, her spirit rejuvenated by her experiences. But unfortunately, her story doesn't end there. Back in King's Lynn, Marjorie tried to settle into a more routine life, taking on the role of God's secretary, writing letters to priests and people seeking her advice. She also helped found a new hospital and participated in public processions. Her friends, family, and clergy welcomed her, recognizing her importance in the community. But some fellow townspeople were less accepting, finding Marjorie's humility and poverty uncomfortable. Scholars debate whether they truly found her embarrassing or if it was simply easier for them to slander her than to try to understand her visions. Nonetheless, in 1420, Marjorie suffered further public humiliation when she became one of the victims of a local man's malicious slander. John Costin accused her of heresy, claiming she had been excommunicated for consorting with the devil. While these accusations were ultimately proven false, Marjorie was deeply affected by the experience. The following year, she left Lynn, possibly to protect her reputation. She stayed with friends in Norwich, where she experienced new visions and wrote her autobiography. Eventually, her health failed, likely due to cancer, which may have been caused by her meager diet. On June 1438, Marjorie passed away in Norwich. She was buried in a church where she had been staying, but her grave was lost over the centuries. As Marjorie embarked on her journey, the Book of Marjorie Kempe unfolded, capturing her extraordinary experiences and offering a glimpse into medieval life. We've marveled at her courage in facing the challenges of her time and the depths of her devotion. that drove her to traverse vast distances in pursuit of spiritual fulfillment. Join me next time, as together we explore more tales from history's hidden corners. Until then, let Marjorie's legacy inspire you to seek out the extraordinary within the ordinary and to find strength and resilience in the face of life's challenges. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to stay tuned for more captivating historical tales. Here's another history hot tip for you. While making this series, I discovered there's a project that's very similar to my own, in that it explores medieval life through the lens of primary sources. It's called History's Mysteries, and it's made by a company. Now, if you're anything like me, you've always been fascinated by mysteries. And History's Mysteries takes you on an epic journey back in time to uncover the truth behind mysterious historical tales. What really happened to King Arthur? Was Cleopatra an Egyptian goddess? How did Alexander the Great die? These are just a few of the mysteries that await you. What sets History's Mysteries apart is that it doesn't just leave you hanging. You get to hear from historians who analyze the evidence and help you separate fact from fiction. So, if you love history and mysteries, or if you just want to learn something new, be sure to check out History's Mysteries. And here's a little secret just for history fans. When you use my link, you can save 25% off your subscription. That's right, 25% off. So don't miss out. Go to the website and start exploring the world's greatest mysteries today. Thanks for listening and happy mystery hunting. Welcome back to Life in the Time of Marjorie Kempe, where we are journeying through early modern England via the experiences of those who lived it. Today, we're shifting our perspective once again, leaving the humble shoes of the average pilgrim to explore the path of Marjorie Kempe's pilgrimage from the vantage point of the nobility. Imagine yourself stepping into a great hall, richly decorated with tapestries and furnished with heavy tables and chairs. The air is thick with the aroma of roasting meat and spiced wine. At the center of it all sits a figure clad in velvet and furs, a noble woman of status, ready to embark on her own pilgrimage to the shrine of Our Lady of Willesden. She might be young and beautiful, the daughter of a baron, eager to make her first grand tour. Or she might be older, her face lined with the hardships of childbirth and widowhood. Her reasons for undertaking the journey vary. Perhaps she is moved by visions or dreams urging her to seek the Virgin Mary's intercession. Maybe she is hoping for a miracle to heal her from illness or injury. Or it could be that social pressure and the desire to display piety motivate her. Whatever the case, the preparations are underway. Her retinue gathers, consisting of servants, priests, chaplains, and perhaps even relatives. Garments are packed alongside cosmetics and perfume, fine fabrics for mass and coarser ones for daily wear. Provisions for the road include bread, cheese, meat pies and wine, all carried by porters or an entire convoy of wagons. As the day of departure arrives, the noblewoman and her entourage process out of the manor house and onto the road. Her carriage waits, cushioned and covered against the elements, a stark contrast to the rough cart or horse-drawn wagon typically used by humbler pilgrims. Along the way, the party travels in relative comfort, stopping at well-appointed inns or perhaps staying at monasteries that offer hospitality to those of noble birth. Entertainment is arranged, with minstrels hired to perform for her amusement during the long hours of travel. Days pass pleasantly enough, and after weeks on the road, the sight of Walsingham appears on the horizon. Relief and anticipation wash over her as she nears her destination. Upon arrival, the noblewoman and her retinue are received with ceremony. She is led to a special lodging, perhaps within the abbey itself or in a house prepared for her stay. Her reception is marked by prayers, music and offerings. She presents her gifts to the shrine, likely valuable items of clothing or perhaps gold and silver. Finally, she makes her way to the place of worship, her steps reverent and purposeful. The interior of the church is rich with color and ornament, a testament to the wealth of her own and other pilgrims. Light filters through stained glass windows depicting biblical scenes or the lives of saints. Altars are adorned with tapestries and flowers, creating an atmosphere of sanctity and beauty. The noble woman kneels before the altar, her gaze fixed on the shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham. She prays fervently, offering thanks, seeking intercession and confessing her sins. Her attendants stand nearby, also engaged in prayer or watching over her mistress. After a brief pause for reflection, the group prepares to return home. The noble woman, though changed by her experience, is ready to resume her life of status and privilege. As she leaves Walsingham, she carries with her the memory of the journey and the hope for continued divine favor. Back at her manor, life returns to normal, but she is forever marked by her pilgrimage. She might speak of her experience to friends and family, sharing the details and significance of the rituals and devotions she encountered along the way. The memory of her pilgrimage colors her thoughts, shaping her understanding of her faith and her place in it. In the quiet moments, she might reach for the gifts she brought back from Walsingham, touching them to recall the atmosphere of the shrine and the solace it offered. For a noblewoman, a pilgrimage to Our Lady of Walsingham was more than just a religious duty. It was a chance to demonstrate piety, receive divine favor, and connect with the wider Christian community. Through her journey, she affirmed her status while also acknowledging her dependence on God's grace. One intriguing aspect of Marjorie Kemp's story is the way it reveals how different classes experience the same pilgrimage in different ways. For while the noblewoman traveled in luxury, encountering carefully curated sights and sounds, Kemp's journey was far more fraught with peril and uncertainty. Her account offers a window into the challenges faced by lower-status pilgrims, highlighting themes of poverty, gender roles, and the pursuit of spiritual fulfillment. Kemp's tale also touches on broader historical issues such as the growth of popular religion, the changing role of women in society, and the tensions between the secular and religious authorities. Throughout our exploration of her pilgrimage, we've seen how various individuals navigated the complexities of this multifaceted journey. From the perspective of the bishop, we've witnessed the administrative and political dimensions of the pilgrimage, understanding the importance of order and control. From the shoes of the average pilgrim, we've endured the physical and financial hardships, experiencing the emotional toll as we walked in their footsteps. And now, having journeyed with the noblewoman, we recognize the social and cultural nuances that colored her path to Walsingham. Each perspective has enriched our understanding of Marjorie Kemp's story and provided insight into the multifaceted nature of pilgrimage in early modern England. As we come to the end of our journey, I invite you to consider the significance of pilgrimage not only as a religious practice, but as a reflection of the human condition. Pilgrimage is a universal experience that transcends time and place. And by exploring the diverse motivations and experiences of pilgrims, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of faith, devotion, and the search for meaning. Whether we walk the physical path to a sacred site or navigate the metaphorical journey of life, we carry with us the hopes, dreams, and struggles that define our shared humanity. It's nearly sundown, so pilgrims must hurry on their way to reach the next town before nightfall. There are perils aplenty in the dark woods, and none wishes to linger after dark. We, too, are coming to the end of our journey through the world of pilgrimage. What will you take away from your time with us? Perhaps the aching reality of life on the road. Marjorie Kemp may stir you to pity, but she would likely tell you, look closer. See the men who laughed and danced around her on Candlemas Day, or watched her ecstasy with suspicion and scorn. Remember the scallop shell, that badge of St. James, worn by those who walk to Santiago de Compostela, but also, some say, by smuggler and heretic, Nicholas of Cologne. Think about the cathedrals you entered, built with the very stones brought here by pilgrims, like the countless others whose bones lie beneath them. Think about the booths set up outside the church where you purchased your indulgences, absolving your sins so you can pass safely through the gates of death. What images come to mind when you hear the word pilgrimage? Write them in the comments below. We hope you've enjoyed exploring this subject with us. In the Middle Ages, pilgrimage wasn't just a religious practice, it was an experience. In fact, many saw it as a second baptism, a journey in which one left the old self behind and returned anew. And yet, despite its importance, pilgrimage has somehow faded from memory. It seems almost quaint today. Do people still walk hundreds of miles to venerate a saintly relic? Well, yes. More than 200,000 pilgrims walk the Camino de Santiago every year, and last July, Pope Francis walked a section of it himself. Of course, that's nothing compared to the millions who made the journey in the Middle Ages. One writer estimated the number of pilgrims journeying to Santiago de Compostela alone exceeded 10 million between 1000 and 1300, though scholars generally consider this figure exaggerated. Still, according to historians, perhaps 1 out of every 25 Europeans undertook a pilgrimage in their lifetime, with women more likely to make the journey than men. Many went multiple times. To be sure, Santiago de Compostela was the most popular destination, but it was far from the only one. Between 1100 and 1300, Christian pilgrims traveled to dozens of sites across Europe, including the city of Jerusalem, the tomb of Christ in France and Italy, and even the supposed resting place of the Holy Grail in Spain. Even great figures like Saint Bernard of Clairvaux made the trek. The medieval period also saw the emergence of other kinds of pilgrimage, including those undertaken to commemorate great events like battles or sieges. Though we think of Thanksgiving as a quintessentially American holiday, its origins lie in the European tradition of pilgrims giving thanks for their safe arrival at a shrine. When the Mayflower arrived in 1620, its passengers celebrated Thanksgiving to give thanks for surviving the crossing. It was decades before the holiday took on its modern form. Pilgrimage is truly a universal human story, one we see echoed in cultures around the world. In Japan, for example, there's the Kumano-Kodo pilgrimage route, dotted with ancient paths and shrines. Some 20,000 pilgrims visit the route every year. Just as in medieval Europe, there are physical challenges, but also a chance to find spiritual enlightenment. It's easy to dismiss these practices as relics of a bygone age. But the desire to travel to sacred spaces and connect with the divine persists. How do pilgrimages shape those who take part in them? What lasting impact does a journey to a holy site leave on the traveler's heart and mind? How do pilgrims confront the physical and emotional challenges of the journey? And how does the experience change them? We'd love to hear your thoughts. As we wrap up our series on pilgrimage, we invite you to join us for another journey, an expedition into the archives of history. When you sign up, you'll receive a monthly newsletter packed with historical tales, insights from our team, and sneak peeks at upcoming episodes. The best part? It's free, so why wait? Start your subscription today and let your own historical adventure begin. Just click the button below to sign up now. On our travels, we've met many pilgrims, the pious and the cynical, the ecstatic and the exhausted. But one constant has been the food. Along the road, food was both a necessity and a performance. And nowhere was this more true than for the elite travelers who used food to broadcast their status. Medieval meals were a carefully choreographed affair, full of rules, customs, and symbolism. The preparation and consumption of food were communal activities, bringing people together and marking important occasions. In fact, one of the greatest medieval feasts was held to mark the start of a pilgrimage. On Ascension Day 1349, Queen Isabella of France hosted an enormous banquet for King Edward III and his entourage, preparing them for their own pilgrimage to the shrine of Thomas Becket in Canterbury. What did these meals look like? How did the pilgrims eat? And what role did food play in their daily lives? Join us as we serve up a feast of medieval history. It's dinner time in medieval England. Your host cuts a chicken into quarters, places it in a stew with cabbage and wheat berries, then lets it simmer over the fire. Soon enough, the savory smell fills the hall. Then comes the moment everyone's been waiting for, the presentation. The host, resplendent in scarlet and blue, carries the finished dish to the table, the centerpiece of which is, of course, the chicken. This particular meal isn't a celebration of any special occasion, just Wednesday. For the nobility, eating wasn't merely a means of sustenance. It was a grand performance, a visual display of wealth and status. Your meal is served on a massive silver platter balanced atop a cloth of gold. Instead of knives, you use a trencher, a slice of bread to soak up the juices. For dessert, the cook prepares a sweet fruit pie and perhaps a tart made with apples or cherries. And of course, no medieval meal would be complete without wine. You pour yourself a generous helping and enjoy the robust flavor. The taste of pilgrimage, however, wasn't always so refined. Along the road, the common pilgrim's diet consisted of stale bread and cheese. Meat was a rare treat, and luxuries like fruit and spices rarely made an appearance. Most pilgrims subsisted on what they carried with them, eating their meager rations throughout the day as they walked. They might have also shared their food with other travelers, trading their cheese for a loaf of bread or a bit of dried meat. Eating was more than just sustenance for medieval pilgrims. It was a way to build community, forge bonds, and share stories. When the day's journey was done, the pilgrims would gather together in their hostels, sharing their meals and swapping tales. Food was also a way for pilgrims to remember the hardships of their journey, a physical manifestation of their endurance. After all, they were traveling without cooks, meaning they often had to eat unappetizing food that had gone bad. Sharing meals with other pilgrims was essential to staying sane. In the cramped and dirty hostels, meals were more than just food, they were a social event. In the evenings, when the day's travel was done, the common pilgrims would gather together in their hostels, sharing their meager meals and swapping stories. Through food, they built connections that helped them endure the hardships of the road. Food was also a way for pilgrims to give back. When a wealthy pilgrim hosted a meal for other travelers, they were not only sharing food, they were demonstrating their wealth and piety. In doing so, they gained prestige and honor, building their reputation as generous and devout Christians. And now, dear viewer, it's time for you to join the feast. What role does food play in your life? How does it reflect your identity and culture? And how does it bring people together? Share your thoughts below and let the conversation begin. We're grateful to have you join us on this journey through time. If you've enjoyed our exploration of medieval pilgrimage, please subscribe and don't miss a single episode. Each week, we bring you new adventures from history's archives. And if there's a topic you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments. Thank you for joining us today, and until next time, happy feasting. As the sun rises over the horizon, you awake in the humble hostelry, your bones aching pleasantly from a day's walk along the ancient road. Your room is dim with first light and empty, save for your straw pallet. A few scattered pebbles mark the spot where you knelt in evening prayer, and the single window gapes open, offering a cool breeze against the heat of the day. Through it, you glimpse a courtyard alive with activity. Pilgrims are readying themselves for the road, and the inn's host calls out over the clamor, reminding stragglers that Mass begins soon in the village chapel. You rise from your bed and stretch stiff limbs, wincing at a particularly nasty blister on one foot. It is almost healed, thank God, but will need tending tonight, along with the others. Sighing, you go to the meager washstand and splash cold water on your face. The icy shock wakes you further, and you turn to the single wooden stool, pulling on a tunic and tightening your belt. You take a crust of bread from the sack at your side and eat it slowly, savoring the humble meal. Then you make the sign of the cross on your chest and join the throng spilling out of the inn and into the morning light. The road stretches endlessly before you, dusty and weary, much like yourself. And so our pilgrimage comes to an end. We began in the dust of the road among barefoot travelers rising from straw beds, sharing crusts of bread and whispered prayers. There is little traffic here in this wild, untamed countryside, and the road is yours alone. The wind whispers through tall grasses, bending them low in waves before you and rustling the leaves of ancient trees lining the way. Overhead, clouds drift lazily across the cerulean sky, hiding the sun from view and casting welcome shade upon the ground. Up ahead, you see the flash of a red hen and hear the startled bark of a dog. Turning, you watch a farmer trudge past, his face weathered and lined like the furrows in his fields, his calloused hands gripping a staff as he makes his way to market. He pauses when he sees you coming, tipping his hat in greeting, before disappearing over a rise. You continue along the road, passing a field of flax, its golden stalks heavy with seed and nodding in the breeze. Further on, you come upon a small grove of trees and a spring bubbling up from the earth, gurgling over mossy stones before tumbling into a pool below. Here, too, you pause to rest, drinking deeply from the cool water and wiping the sweat from your brow. Beneath the shade of the trees, you sit on a nearby stone and pull out your psalter, running your fingers over the worn leather cover as you begin to pray. The sun climbs higher in the sky, and you, refreshed and renewed, continue on your way. As you walk, you think of the miles behind you and the ones still to come. Will you reach the holy city before winter? Will you find favor with the Virgin Mary, or will sickness or sorrow strike you down? These thoughts and more run through your head as you trudge ever onward, step after step. Suddenly, a sound breaks the afternoon calm, and you look up to see a company of men riding toward you. At their head, a mounted knight with a shield emblazoned on its surface. Behind him follow several squires and pages, bearing banners and pennons fluttering in the wind. They approach quickly, and you step aside to let them pass, dreading the rumble of their heavy hooves. But they slow to a stop before you, and the knight raises his visor. "Good traveler," he asks, "what brings you to this part of the road?" You hesitate, unsure how to answer, and the knight nods to one of his squires, who steps forward holding out a silver coin. "Here, take this," he says, "and follow us to the next village. We will share our bounty with you and ease your passage." Overjoyed, you accept the gift and fall in behind the knight's procession, walking beside his horse and marveling at the trappings of his wealth. For a time you travel together, and you learn that these noblemen are returning from a royal tournament held in the nearby city, their pockets heavy with prize money, and their heads full of victory. They make merry, singing songs of valor and mirth as they ride, and they invite you to join them, but you decline, preferring to walk in quiet contemplation. The squires toss a leather pouch to you, and you look up to see a small smile under the knight's visor. As twilight begins to fall, you come to a bend in the road, and the procession slows. Ahead, you can see the lights of a village twinkling in the gathering dark. "It is here we must part ways," the knight says, turning to you. "We thank you for your company and wish you safe travels on the remainder of your pilgrimage." He extends a gloved hand and you take it, surprised by its softness. "May God keep you in his mercy and bring you to the place you seek," he says. And then he is gone, riding hard into the village and leaving you to the peace of the road. The last of the daylight fades from the sky, and you hurry along, eager to reach the village before nightfall. As you walk, you recall the night's warning of highwaymen about, clutching your staff tightly and keeping your eyes sharp for danger. Finally, you hear the distant sound of church bells and push on faster, bursting into the village square breathless and relieved. With grateful heart, you make your way to the village inn, collapsing into a chair by the fire and ordering a hot supper. You awaken in the guest room of the inn, the smell of roasting meat drifting up from the kitchen below. Sunlight streams through the window, touching the rough-hewn beams overhead with gold. Stretching, you climb down from your straw pallet and pad to the window. Outside, you can hear the shouts of children at play and the murmur of townsfolk going about their business. You pull on your tunic and tighten your belt, smoothing down the wrinkles in your habit. After a breakfast of bread and cheese, you say your prayers and set out for the road again, following a well-worn path that leads away from the village. The road winds through a forest, and sunlight filters down from above, dappling the ground with gold. The air is cool and damp, and you can hear the sound of birdsong all around you. After some time, the trees open up and you come to a clearing. In the middle stands a chapel, its roof caked with moss and its walls covered in ivy. Peeking inside, you can see that the altar is bare and the benches are overturned. Still, you kneel down anyway, closing your eyes and whispering a prayer for guidance and strength. When you open them again, you notice a small carving in the wall, depicting a hand reaching out to help a pilgrim on their way. You rise and continue on your way, taking the hand-shaped stone with you. As you walk, you think about what it must have been like for those early Christians who built this chapel, struggling to maintain their faith in a pagan world. How had they managed to carve such a beautiful image in this rough stone? What had inspired them to persevere in the face of so much adversity? You don't know the answers to these questions, but as you round a bend in the road, you come upon a sight that stirs something deep within you. Before you stands a magnificent abbey, its towers reaching up to the heavens and its spires glinting in the sun. Stepping closer, you see that the abbey is surrounded by a high wall, hiding its interior from view. On the far side, a heavy gate stands ajar, beckoning you to enter. Hesitantly, you push the door open and walk inside. The courtyard is overgrown with weeds, and the fountain in the center has crumbled into ruin. The only sign of life is a single bird fluttering about in the ruins of an archway. Turning, you see a path leading to a small chapel, and you walk inside. The interior is dimly lit, but as your eyes adjust to the gloom, you can see that the walls are covered with paintings of saints and martyrs. In the center stands a simple wooden statue of the Virgin Mary, her gaze turned heavenward, as if in prayer. You approach the statue and kneel down, whispering a prayer for protection and guidance. As you rise, you feel a sense of peace settle over you, and you know that you are exactly where you are meant to be. And so our pilgrimage ends here in this quiet chapel, surrounded by the relics of a forgotten age. We began in the dust of the road, among barefoot travelers rising from straw beds, sharing crusts of bread and whispered prayers. We walked with Marjorie Kempe, her tears flowing as freely as her footsteps, carrying her across seas and deserts to the holy city itself. We paused in the hushed chapels of Europe, before reliquaries glowing with gold and mystery, the bones of saints resting in silence as pilgrims filed past. And we watched the nobles' procession, with its guards and comforts moving steadily toward the same shrines, yet in such different fashion from the common traveller. 4 paths, 4 glimpses, yet all bound by the same thread, the slow and steady rhythm of devotion, step after step, mile after mile. As you lie here now, listening in the stillness, you might reflect on the contrast between then and now. The medieval pilgrim walked in uncertainty, not knowing if they would return home, not knowing if the road ahead would bring comfort or peril. Tonight, you rest in safety. No blisters, no bandits, no mouldy bread or crowded hostel. Only the quiet hum of the present and the gentle knowledge that your bed will hold you through the night. Pilgrimage was never meant to be easy. Its hardship was its prayer, yet in its repetition, its rhythm, there is something strangely familiar, like the slow drift of thought before sleep, like the steady beat of a heart at rest. So let your mind drift, as the pilgrims once did, step after step, prayer after prayer. Their world is long gone, but their footsteps echo softly through time, carrying with them a reminder that even the hardest roads can be walked, and that the end of every journey brings rest. Now close your eyes and let the past fade quietly into dream. The bells of medieval churches have stopped ringing, the fires in the hostels have burned down to embers, and the road has grown silent in the night. Sleep well, traveler.